In Matthew 23:9, Jesus says, "And call no man your father upon the earth, for one is your Father which is in heaven." At first glance, Jesus seems to be saying that Christians should not call anyone other than God Father. If that is the case, Catholics would definitely be in error for calling the Pope, priests, and bishops Father. But is that what Jesus actually means? Think about it logically for a second. If you can't call anyone other than God your Father, what do you call the man who married your mother and helped conceive you in her womb? One of the 10 commandments is honor your father and mother. In John 8:56, Jesus refers to Abraham as your father, that is, the father of the Israelites. Is Jesus contradicting his own words? Of course not. Now, a possible response from critics is that Jesus is not referring to biological fathers or genealogical fathers such as Abraham, but fathers in the religious or spiritual sense. God alone is our spiritual father, so it is wrong to refer to a priest or bishop as father. Is this a valid argument? No. In 1 Corinthians 4:15, St. Paul, writing to the church in Corinth, says, "For in Christ Jesus I became your father through the gospel." Here we see clearly that St. Paul considers himself a spiritual father to all the Christians in Corinth. Romans 4:11 says, "And he, Abraham, received the sign of circumcision as a seal of the righteousness he had by faith while he was still uncircumcised. So then he is the father of all who believe but are not circumcised, in order that righteousness might be credited to them." Another point that critics often overlook is that in the exact same context where Jesus is said to condemn calling men father, he also condemns calling them rabbi or teacher. Matthew 23:8, "But you are not to be called rabbi, for you have one teacher and you are all brothers." If God is the only teacher, what are we to call the people who teach our children at school? Moreover, the title of teacher is relegated to members of the early church. 1 Corinthians 12:28 says, "And in the church God has appointed first of all apostles, second prophets, third teachers, then workers of miracles, etc." So we can clearly see that Jesus is not condemning the usage of the terms father or teacher in the normative or religious sense. So what exactly does Jesus mean in Matthew 23:9? Well, to properly exegete any biblical passage, it is important to not take the verse out of its context. In the preceding context, we see that Jesus is condemning the hypocrisy and self-righteousness of the Pharisees, who would seek the validity of men by being called pompous titles such as Father and Teacher. Jesus warns his disciples not to seek the validity and admiration of men, but of God, the Father in heaven. Therefore, Jesus is not condemning the normative or religious usage of the term Father, but rather the self-righteous spirit of the Pharisees.